Welcome back, everyone. Okay, so today's explainer is looking at a massive, literally ground-shaking shift in global geopolitics. You've probably seen the news, right? The world map is going through some wild realignments right now. But today, we're zooming in on a development that is basically the ultimate example of that old rule: the enemy of my enemy often becomes my friend. It's a story packed with historical irony, shifting power dynamics, and a seriously stunning comeback on the global stage.
Okay, let's dive into this because here is the core paradox we're unpacking today. How exactly did the Taliban, a group that the international community literally doesn't even recognize as a legitimate government, manage to shake hands on a major military deal with Vladimir Putin and the Russian state? I mean, it sounds like a geopolitical fiction thriller, doesn't it? But it's very, very real. And to get how we ended up here, we really have to look at the massive strategic vacuum that got left behind on the world stage.
The source material we're looking at uses this really potent metaphor to describe the situation. It says, never leave your enemy half dead. And honestly, that perfectly captures this whole geopolitical chess match. See, when the United States abruptly withdrew from Afghanistan, they didn't just end a war. They left behind this sprawling, highly volatile vacuum. And if there's one thing we know about geopolitics, it's that vacuums never stay empty for long. Russia has aggressively and very calculatingly stepped right into that exact void, basically turning a former battleground into a brand new launch pad for their own strategic ambitions.
All right, Section 1, the Russia-Taliban Defense Pact, a new alliance in the making.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the sheer unprecedented nature of the event itself. Between May 26th and 29th, at an international security forum in Moscow, Russian and Taliban diplomats didn't just casually bump into each other. No, they shook hands and actually formalized a historic military pact. The Russian Ministry of Defense sat down with Taliban defense officials and hammered out an agreement. Functionally, Russia is treating the Taliban not as some rogue entity, but as a legitimate state actor that can sign international defense treaties. It's a monumental shift. But to really grasp the weight, and honestly, the massive irony of this handshake in Moscow, we have to flip the pages back a bit.
Which brings us to Section 2, Afghanistan's bloody history, and the absolute irony of geopolitics. And this brilliantly illustrates the dizzying cycle of intervention in the region. If we trace it back to 1979, the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan. To push them out, the United States famously funded and armed local fighters, the Mujahideen, who were the predecessors to the Taliban. Eventually, the Soviets were forced out by 1989. Then, in 1996, the Taliban rises to power. Fast forward to 2001, post 9/11, and the U.S. enters Afghanistan to fight the very forces that evolved from the groups they used to support. And finally, in 2021, the U.S. leaves. So, the United States originally funded these fighters to defeat the Soviets, only to spend the next 2 decades fighting them themselves. Which brings us to this incredibly staggering number: 20. 20 years. That is the amount of time, not to mention the trillions of dollars and the countless American lives, spent trying to eradicate the Taliban and al-Qaeda from Afghanistan. And what's the ultimate geopolitical irony here? After 2 decades of grueling Western intervention trying to secure the region, the United States is out, and Russia, the exact nation the U.S. originally tried to kick out of Afghanistan, is making a triumphant return, standing side by side with the Taliban. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. So how did Russia actually pull this off? Let's bring the narrative forward to the present day.
Let's look at Section 3, Russia's new move, filling the American vacuum.
Let's move to this and see how it builds, because this alliance definitely wasn't some overnight whim. It was a highly calculated, systematic strategy. Step 1. Back in 2022, right after the U.S. left, Russia and the Taliban signed deals for oil, gas, and wheat. They started with just basic trade. Step 2. Diplomatic normalization. The source material notes a target for 2025 to officially remove the Taliban from Russia's list of banned terrorist organizations, basically treating them strictly as the rightful government. And then, Step 3, the military pact. So trade built trust, diplomacy built recognition, and all of that culminated in the defense agreement we're seeing today.
But you're probably wondering, why defense? Like, what is the actual glue holding them together? So the crucial point is ISIS-Khorasan, or ISIS-K. This is a militant group growing in the region that deeply, deeply threatens both parties. The Taliban is struggling to control them within Afghanistan, and Russia sees them as a severe threat to its neighboring Central Asian allies. It's just a classic case of shared mutual interest. Both Russia and the Taliban desperately need each other's cooperation to counter this rising threat right on their doorsteps.
And the strategic benefits for Russia actually go way beyond counterterrorism. Think about Bagram Air Base. This was once America's largest, most vital military hub in the whole region. There have been rumblings in U.S. political circles about maybe trying to reclaim or use military assets there to project power, especially toward Iran. But by heavily aligning with the Taliban, Russia is basically ensuring that the U.S. is permanently blocked from reclaiming Bagram. It's a massive strategic checkmate that limits American leverage in the Middle East and completely impacts global power balances. And whenever a giant move like this happens, the regional tectonic plates shift. So let's look at the fallout, starting with a major beneficiary.
Moving into Section 4, Advantages for India, Shifting Regional Power Dynamics.
Notice the really stark contrast here based on the source analysis. On one side, you have India's position. India has maintained strong, historical ties with Russia, and at the same time, they've been having very positive diplomatic meetings with Taliban officials. They're engaging both sides of this new pact. On the flip side, look at Pakistan's position. Historically, Pakistan held a lot of strategic leverage by using Afghan militant groups against India. But with the Taliban now tightly allied with Russia, who is India's friend, and India engaging the Taliban directly, Pakistan's historical strategy is basically neutralized. India secures its flank, while Pakistan is left dealing with these ongoing violent border clashes with Afghanistan. So if Russia, the Taliban, and potentially India are navigating this shift favorably, who's actually bearing the brunt of the negative consequences?
That brings us to Section 5, Troubles for Pakistan and the U.S., the geopolitical losers in this scenario.
Let's run through these bullet points rapid fire because the domino effect here is truly staggering. For the United States, 20 years and billions of dollars effectively wasted as the region falls right into the hands of a primary rival. The U.S. had to abandon critical, irreplaceable assets like Bagram. And for Pakistan, it's a massive, multifaceted crisis. They're facing rising, deadly border clashes with the Taliban. Economically, they're restricted from buying much-needed cheap Russian oil because of heavy U.S. diplomatic pressure. And politically, it's just chaotic. Former Prime Minister Imran Khan has actually been jailed ever since his controversial visit to meet Putin right when the Ukraine crisis broke out. It is just a compounding strategic headache for both Washington and Islamabad.
Which leaves us with one final, incredibly provocative thought. The source material raises this huge wild card question that we absolutely have to consider. With this defense pact formalized, will Taliban fighters eventually join the front lines of the Ukraine war on behalf of Russia? Now, obviously, the Taliban currently faces severe internal challenges just trying to govern. But Putin has previously leveraged pacts like the one with North Korea to bolster his forces. If Russia calls in a favor, it could fundamentally alter the global world order even further, literally blending two entirely different geopolitical theaters into one. It's a wild, chilling possibility, and it's definitely something we're going to be watching closely. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll catch you in the next one.